Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following the latest gaming hardware. I'm Daemon Hatfield, and as always, I'm joined by Max Scoville, host of Podcast Beyond, and Ryan McCaffrey, host of Podcast Unlocked. And this week we're discussing a recent analyst report that suggests Sony may push the launch of the PlayStation 6 beyond 2028 and lengthen the PlayStation 5 lifecycle. David Gibson, senior analyst at MST International, who focuses on game and tech companies, published a report giving insights into the Sony Group's current performance and potential next moves. According to Gibson, Sony's earnings for the third quarter are expected to exceed forecasts, with strong sales of first and third-party games driving growth. So things are going very well for PlayStation right now. Gibson said, Sony expects the PS5 lifecycle to be longer than that of previous console generations, adding, there's a high likelihood that the PS6 launch will occur after 2028. So I guess 2029 at the earliest. Gibson also observed that, quote, PS5 user activity continues to set all-time record highs according to usage data. Sony is focusing more on retaining active users than expanding hardware sales. So for context, the PS1 generation lasted 6 years in between PS1 and PS2 here in the US. PS2 was only 5 years. PS3 was 7 years, and PS4 was also 7 years. So if PS6 were released in 2029, that would be 9 years since the launch of the PS5. So Max, does that seem that surprising to you?
Given the current state of everything getting more expensive and just the, geopolitical everything, it's not surprising. I'm actually a little bit optimistic about this. If this is the case, I think it's great news because realistically, looking at what's going on in the world of gaming right now, what games are struggling to make use of the PS5? Like what games are bumping into the ceiling and being like, we need more power here? I mean, I think this is an incredible machine. And if it's not, there's also the PS5 Pro. But the biggest complaint we've leveled at the PS5 Pro is that there's nothing that really takes full advantage of it. There's nothing that's really blowing us away there. And obviously there's you can always improve graphics. You can always bump things up a bunch. But I think what's great about a longer console life cycle is it gives developers more time to get a feel for how you make games for it, to really optimize it, to take full advantage of the technology. And, you only grow the size of the install base, which means more people are going to play these games. And I think looking back historically, the best games for any given console generation, more likely than not, come out at the tail end of that console generation. Looking at, just last gen, we had the Last of Us Part 2, Red Dead Redemption 2, Ghost of Tsushima were all at the tail end of the PS4. Mm-hmm. The PS3 had The Last of Us. Going back to the PS2, God of War 2 came out after the PS3 was already out. You've got, classics like Chrono Trigger that are butting up against the launch of the N64 over on Super Nintendo. I think there's really no downside for developers having more time to play with a particular set of hardware like this. And, frankly, like I know it's a show about hardware, about consoles and everything, but they're a means to an end. And the end is playing cool video games. And I just as soon play more cool video games. And if Sony wants to sell new hardware, I think they also have the opportunity to make the PS5 even smaller. It's not like it could get much bigger. And, they could also take a page out of the Switch's book and look at making sort of a portable iteration of it, which we've heard rumblings of. I'm not in a hurry to get a PS6, and I don't really think anyone else should be. And it's, again, that feels like a long ways off. It definitely would be, the longest gap between PlayStation releases, but we don't really need it,
Yeah, I agree with you. And I don't think there's much of an appetite from Sony fans for a PlayStation 6 right now for all the reasons that you said. By my count, there are still over 100 games coming to PlayStation 4 this year that we know of right now. And by my estimate, about 75% of the PlayStation 5's library can be played on the PS4. So there's still very few reasons why you would absolutely have to have a PS5. But Ryan, things are different for Xbox. Its hardware sales have bottomed out, of course, but it's also finding great success being a third-party publisher. And we've heard rumors about how their next console is going to be much more open, like a PC. So I don't know. How do you think Xbox is looking at what the right time is to launch the next generation Xbox?
Well, for those reasons, I would say that Xbox has a little more incentive to get something new out the door. Now, it's not a new thing. A new piece of hardware isn't going to solve their brand issues. There's kind of nowhere for them to go but up in terms of excitement for the brand from here. So if they pull off what I guess we can now sort of say a Steam machine like open PC console, that runs Xbox games via Windows, that can play, it can connect to Steam, it can connect to Epic Game Store, etc. That leaves room for Microsoft to generate a little bit more interest, a little bit more buzz, and the Steam machine will already be out there. I mean, that thing's coming. We don't quite know when. We thought it might already be any minute now, and we haven't gotten the date yet as of this taping. But yeah, I do think Microsoft is in more of a position to get something out the door sooner. Now, is it going to make a material difference in how the games look and perform? Maybe not a material one. It'll make a difference, but I wonder if at least in the early going, assuming that Microsoft does ship their next piece of hardware before Sony ships a PlayStation 6, if we almost kind of might be looking at a PS5 Pro-like situation where it is a more powerful piece of hardware and it will run things better, but not in any sort of I need to run out and buy this right now kind of way, because it'll remain to be seen what games take full advantage of it. I mean, Microsoft is shipping a ton of games these days, and that's all we've really ever wanted from them since they stopped doing that in the Xbox One era. But and if those games do run best on the next Xbox, well, that's certainly a plus. But I think even Microsoft won't be sorry to see the PS5 stick around, not even for competitive reasons, but for, as you were saying, Daemon, they're having a ton of success shipping their games on PS5. And so if there's a, whatever it is, however many tens of millions or before too long, maybe even 100 million PS5 owners out there that Microsoft can sell their first party games to, they're going to be perfectly content to do that.
Do you think, Max, there's any chance that PlayStation would be sort of taking a wait and see approach to see what Xbox actually does with its next console?
They certainly have the luxury of doing that, but also they put out their Pro. Like they've already put their weird half-gen refresh, and I don't have access to sales data on that, but just anecdotally based on everyone I've talked to and everything we've seen about it, anyone who spent the money to pick one up is like, yeah, it's cool, but it's not a must-have device, and we haven't really seen any games take full advantage of that. To Ryan's point about the opening up to different storefronts, the Steam machine of it all, the rumors we heard about whatever the next Xbox is, I think it's going to be less of a hardware thing and more about how people are using this thing that's going to be the real selling point. And in Xbox's case, if it means opening it up to Windows gamers, or just really making it so it's a kind of a storefront agnostic device, that's a pretty huge swing. And that, honestly, that makes me kind of interested in that device. Meanwhile, if Sony were to come along with a thing that's comparably powered to the PS5, but it's got the portability of a Switch or a Steam Deck, that's also appealing, but in a completely different way. I just feel like we've reached this point with the actual performance of the hardware that it's pretty much diminishing returns, and there's not really a huge benefit to just kind of make it this arms race of trying to have more realistic pores on photorealistic CGI people.
So, Ryan, we've been talking about how we're not in any rush for a PlayStation 6. There's been a very long transition period from PS4 to PS5, and we're not really seeing games that are pushing the PS5 to its absolute limit yet. Do you feel the same way about your Xbox Series X, or are you more excited to get new Xbox hardware?
No, I do feel the same way. And in fact, you both kind of bring up another maybe reason to root for this generation to go on a bit longer, and that is the long development cycles on big AAA games. Yeah. They've only gotten longer and longer and longer. We were just doing a podcast this week on Unlocked of the top 100 Xbox games of all time. Big list that we put together with our friends at Outside Xbox. And those games all, yes, it was a couple generations ago, but they all took 5 years, or in most cases, a lot less than 5 years. And so now with Series X and PS5 games taking 5, 6, 7, 8 years to get done, do we really want new hardware anytime soon that's probably only, while yes, theoretically gonna offer us more technological bells and whistles, but only going to lengthen the development times? I'm not sure any of us are necessarily in a hurry to wait upwards now of a decade for a big AAA game. So that could be another sort of half secret reason, I should say, to root for an extension of this generation, is to keep development times shorter than they would be on PS6 and the next Xbox.
Yeah, if Fable does finally come out this fall, it'll be 6 years since it was just announced. Certainly development probably started before that. So yeah, maybe it is time. Maybe the time of the 5 or 6 year console generation, maybe it's fine that time is over. Okay, so January been pretty slow for new game releases, but things are about to heat up in February. So we want to know, what February game are you most excited about? Dragon Quest VII Reimagined, Neo 3, High on Life 2, Mario Tennis Fever, Reanimal, or Resident Evil Requiem? I have a good idea of what will come out on top there. Make sure to vote at IGN.com the day this episode goes live. We'll share the results with you next episode, just like we can with last week's poll. What was your favorite game from the recent Xbox Developer Direct? And the winner by far was Fable. 71.6%, whereas Forza Horizon 6 number 2 had 21.3%. Ryan, I was a little surprised. I'm excited for Fable. I know everyone's excited for Fable. I just think driving has a little bit more mass appeal than fantasy with British humor. And, the Forza series has been much more relevant in recent years, and it was Game of the Year for IGN in 2021 and then was a huge hit on PS5 last year. So I was just a little surprised that there was such a wide delta.
Well, I think it's that Fable is a completely new thing. Yes, it's a revival of an old IP, but it just represents new promise and new potential, whereas Forza Horizon 6, it has an incredible track record, but we know what it is, right? Yeah. So I'm not at all surprised. Like I voted for Fable in that poll as well, so good to see I'm not alone on that one.
Makes sense. All right, right now at Humble, you can get Humble Choice for just $14.99 and score a curated bundle of PC games for January, including Sonic Frontiers, Tomb Raiders 4 through 6 Remastered, Hunt Showdown 1896, Etran Odyssey 2 HD, Nice Day for Fishing, Metal Slug Tactics, Settlement Survival, and Wizard of Legend 2. This month's choice is available through February 3rd, so head to humblebundle.com and start playing today. And that's our show. Thank you to both Max and Ryan. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes to make this show possible. My name is Daemon. We'll be back next week with more of the latest gaming hardware. We'll see you then. This episode of Next Gen Console Watch was produced by Damon Hatfield, Jobert Atienza, and Sam Claiborne. Damon is also the host, and Max Scoville and Ryan McCaffrey serve as regular panelists. Technical direction is by Jobert Atienza, with technical production by Marian Franzen and Amir Rakib. Audio engineering is handled by Amir Rakib. Post-production editing is by Jobert Atienza, and graphic design is by Justin Vachon. Next Gen Console Watch is an IGN production and part of the Geek Media Network.